The dust kicked up from Jack Morrison's boots as he walked through the small frontier town of Red Creek. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and red. Jack was tired. His body hurt from riding all day, and his heart hurt from something much deeper. 3 months ago, Jack had everything a man could want. He owned a small ranch outside of town with his wife Sarah and their twin daughters, Emma and Lucy. The girls were only 8 years old, with bright blue eyes like their mother and wild brown hair that never stayed in braids no matter how hard Sarah tried. But cholera came to Red Creek that spring like a thief in the night. It took Sarah first, then the twins just 2 days later. Jack buried them on the hill behind their house under the old oak tree where the girls used to play. He could still hear their laughter echoing in the wind sometimes. After the funeral, Jack couldn't stay at the ranch anymore. Every corner reminded him of his family. Sarah's apron still hung on the kitchen hook. The girls' toys were scattered in their room exactly where they left them. So Jack sold everything except his horse, his gun, and the clothes on his back. He became a drifter, taking odd jobs wherever he could find them. Now Jack worked for whoever would pay him. Sometimes he helped move cattle from one ranch to another. Sometimes he fixed fences or helped with harvests. He never stayed in one place too long. Moving kept the pain from catching up with him, or so he told himself. On this particular evening, Jack was heading to the saloon for a drink and maybe some information about work. The town was busier than usual. People were talking in small groups, and there was tension in the air that made Jack's skin prickle. "Hey, Morrison," called out Tom Bradley, the town's sheriff. Tom was a good man, fair and honest, but he looked worried tonight. "Got a minute?" Jack stopped and touched the brim of his hat. "Evening, Sheriff. What's on your mind?" Tom glanced around nervously. "Walk with me. There's something you need to know." They walked away from the main street toward Tom's office. The sheriff's boots made heavy sounds on the wooden sidewalk. Jack could tell something serious was happening. "Jack, I know you've been through hell these past months," Tom began. "And I hate to ask this of you, but I need your help." "What kind of help?" Jack asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Tom stopped walking and faced Jack directly. "There's been Apache raids about 50 miles north of here. A small settlement called Pine Valley. They hit it hard 3 days ago." Jack's blood ran cold. Apache raids were serious business. The Apache were fierce warriors who knew the desert better than any white man. When they raided, people usually died. "How bad?" Jack asked quietly. "Bad. Most of the adults were killed. But here's the thing, Jack. They took some children. 3 little girls, to be exact." Jack felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 3 little girls. He thought of Emma and Lucy, and his hands started to shake. "The territorial government is putting together a search party," Tom continued. "But they're all talk and no action. By the time they get organized and send soldiers, those girls will be long gone or worse. We need someone who knows the land, someone who can track, someone who can move fast." "Why me?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because you're the best tracker in 3 counties. Because you know how to survive out there. And because..." Tom paused. "Because I think you need this as much as those girls do." Jack stared at the sheriff for a long moment. He wanted to say no. He wanted to walk away and forget about 3 little girls who weren't his daughters. He had enough pain without taking on more. But then, he thought about Emma and Lucy again. He thought about how scared they would have been if someone had taken them. He thought about Sarah and what she would say if she knew he had a chance to save 3 children and walked away. "Tell me everything you know," Jack said finally. Tom's face showed relief. They went into the sheriff's office, where Tom spread a map on his desk. The oil lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. "The Apache who hit Pine Valley were led by a warchief named Black Wolf," Tom explained, pointing to areas on the map. "He's smart and dangerous. Usually operates out of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, but lately he's been moving south." "What about the girls?" Any information on them? The oldest is maybe 10, youngest about 6. All blonde hair, which makes them valuable to the Apache. They'll either keep them as slaves or trade them to other tribes. Jack studied the map carefully. The territory between Red Creek and the mountains was harsh desert, full of canyons and mesas where a man could get lost and die of thirst. But Jack knew that country. He had hunted there with his father when he was young. "I'll need supplies," Jack said. "Food, water, ammunition. And I'll need to leave at first light." "Already taken care of," Tom replied. "The town council authorized whatever you need. There's also this." Tom opened his desk drawer and pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coins. $500 now, 500 more when you bring those girls back safe." Jack looked at the money but didn't reach for it. "This isn't about money, Tom." "I know. But you'll need it for supplies and for after. Those girls will need care when you find them." Jack nodded and took the pouch. He was about to leave when Tom grabbed his arm. "Jack, I have to tell you something else. The Apache who took these girls, they're not just any war party. Word is they're planning something big. The army thinks Black Wolf is trying to unite several tribes for a major offensive against the white settlements." "What does that mean for the girls?" "It means they might be more than just captives. They might be bargaining chips. And that makes them both more valuable and more dangerous to rescue." Jack understood. If the Apache were planning a big war, they wouldn't give up the girls easily. It also meant there would be many more warriors than usual in Black Wolf's band. "How many men can I take with me?" Jack asked. Tom shook his head. "None. Every man who can fight needs to stay here to defend the town if the Apache come this way. You're going alone." Jack wasn't surprised. He worked better alone anyway. Other people slowed him down and made noise. But going after a war party by himself was dangerous, even for someone with his skills. "There's one more thing," Tom said. "The army knows about your mission. If you succeed, they want to talk to you about the Apache movements you observe. The territorial governor is very interested in any information about Black Wolf's plans." Jack didn't care about the territorial governor or the army. He only cared about 3 little girls who were probably scared and crying for their parents who would never come for them. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay in his bedroll behind the livery stable, staring up at the stars. The same stars that Emma and Lucy used to make wishes on from their bedroom window. Sarah used to tell them stories about the constellations, making up adventures about brave princesses and magical horses. As he lay there, Jack tried to imagine what the 3 captured girls were going through. Were they hurt? Were they crying? Were they being treated badly? The thoughts made his chest tight with anger and fear. But underneath the anger was something else. For the first time since Sarah and the twins died, Jack felt like he had a purpose. He had spent months drifting, trying to forget, trying to run from his pain. But now he had something to do, something that mattered. Just before dawn, Jack got up and checked his gear one more time. His rifle was clean and loaded. His pistol was in good working order. He had jerky, hardtack, and enough water for 3 days if he was careful. After that, he would have to find water sources in the desert, but he knew where most of them were. His horse, a tough Mustang named Dusty, was ready too. Dusty was 12 years old and had been through everything with Jack. The horse was smart and sure-footed, perfect for the rough country they would be traveling through. As the sun came up over the mountains, Jack rode out of Red Creek. A few early risers watched him go, but nobody said anything. They all knew what he was doing, and they all knew the odds of him coming back alive. Jack didn't look back at the town. He kept his eyes on the trail ahead, following the tracks that would lead him north toward the Apache stronghold. The desert stretched out before him like a brown and orange sea, beautiful and deadly at the same time. As Dusty's hooves kicked up dust on the trail, Jack thought about Sarah one more time. He could almost hear her voice on the wind, telling him to be careful, to come home safe. But Jack knew he might not be coming home at all. And, strangely, that thought didn't scare him as much as it should have. For the first time in months, Jack Morrison had something to live for. 3 little girls needed him, and he wasn't going to let them down. Not like he had let Sarah and Emma and Lucy down by not being able to save them from the sickness. The desert wind blew hot against his face as Jack rode north, following tracks that were already 3 days old. Somewhere out there, in the vast wilderness of canyons and mesas, 3 frightened children waited for someone to save them. Jack Morrison was going to be that someone, or he was going to die trying. The tracks led through a narrow canyon where the walls rose high on both sides, blocking out most of the morning sun. Jack dismounted and studied the ground carefully. The Apache had passed through here, but they had been careful to hide their trail. Only someone with Jack's experience could have followed them this far. He found a small piece of fabric caught on a thorny bush. It was blue gingham, the kind used to make little girls' dresses. Jack's heart clenched as he carefully removed the fabric and put it in his pocket. One of the girls had passed this way, probably scared and confused, not knowing if she would ever see home again. Jack remounted Dusty and continued following the faint trail. The Apache were good, but they weren't perfect. They left tiny signs that most people would miss, but Jack had learned tracking from his Navajo friend Joe Crowfeather when he was young. Joe had taught him to see the desert like the Native Americans did, to read the land like a book. As the day grew hotter, Jack found more signs. A small footprint in the soft sand near a waterhole. Another piece of fabric, this one white. The Apache were moving fast, but they had to stop for water just like everyone else, and that's when they left traces. By noon, the sun was blazing overhead like a furnace. Jack found shade under an overhang of rock and gave Dusty some water from his hat. He ate some jerky and hardtack while he studied his map and thought about his next move. The tracks were leading toward the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, just as Tom had predicted. But the Apache would have scouts watching their back trail. Jack would have to be very careful not to be seen, or his rescue mission would become a suicide mission very quickly. As he sat in the shade, Jack thought about the 3 girls again. He wondered what their names were, what they looked like, if they reminded him of Emma and Lucy. He tried not to think about what the Apache might be doing to them, but the thoughts crept into his mind anyway. Jack had heard stories about white children captured by Apache. Some were adopted into the tribe and treated well. Others were used as slaves. A few were eventually ransomed back to their families. But many were never seen again, disappearing into the vast wilderness of the Southwest. These 3 girls weren't going to disappear. Jack wouldn't let that happen. He had failed to save his own daughters from disease, but he wouldn't fail to save these children from the Apache. It was a promise he made to himself, to Sarah, and to Emma and Lucy wherever they were now. The afternoon heat was too intense for traveling, so Jack waited until evening to continue. This was the way of the desert. You moved when it was cool and rested when the sun was high. The Apache knew this, and Jack knew it too. As the sun began to set, painting the sky red and gold, Jack mounted Dusty again and rode deeper into the wilderness. The tracks were getting fresher now. He was gaining on the war party, but that also meant he was getting closer to danger. In the distance, he could see the dark outline of the mountains where Black Wolf and his warriors were heading. Somewhere up there, in a hidden canyon or a secret valley, 3 little girls waited for rescue. Jack touched the piece of blue gingham in his pocket and urged Dusty forward into the gathering darkness. The real test was just beginning. 3 days into the desert, Jack knew he was being watched. The feeling crawled up his spine like a cold snake, making the hair on his neck stand up. He couldn't see anyone, but after years of living on the frontier, a man learned to trust his instincts. Somewhere in the rocks above him, Apache scouts were tracking his movements. Jack kept riding as if he didn't know, but his hand stayed close to his rifle. Dusty seemed to sense the tension too. The horse's ears kept twitching, and his steps were more careful than usual. The trail had led Jack deep into a maze of red rock canyons where the walls rose hundreds of feet on both sides. It was beautiful country, but deadly if you didn't know your way around. One wrong turn could lead to a dead end where enemies could trap you like a rat in a hole. Jack had been following the Apache tracks for 3 days now, and the signs were getting fresher. He had found more pieces of the girls' clothing, and yesterday he had discovered a small camp where the war party had spent the night. The ashes were still warm when he found them. But the Apache weren't making it easy. They were covering their tracks better now, using every trick they knew to throw off pursuit. They walked their horses through streams to hide hoofprints. They scattered in different directions and, then, came back together miles later. They even tied brush to their horses' tails to sweep away tracks in the dust. Jack smiled grimly as he read their sign. Black Wolf was no amateur. The war chief was using tactics that would fool most white trackers. But Jack had learned from Joe Crowfeather, and Joe had been one of the best trackers in the territory before he died in a hunting accident 5 years ago. As the morning sun climbed higher, Jack found what he was looking for. A narrow side canyon led off to the right, barely wide enough for a horse and rider. Most people would ride right past it without noticing, but Jack saw the tiny scratches on the rock wall where something had brushed against it. Jack dismounted and studied the ground at the canyon mouth. There, in a patch of soft sand, was the faint outline of a small bare foot. One of the girls had stepped here, probably while the Apache were watering their horses at the spring Jack could hear trickling somewhere ahead. The cowboy led Dusty into the narrow canyon, moving as quietly as possible. The walls closed in around them, creating a twilight world even though it was still morning outside. Water dripped from somewhere high above, and the air was cooler and slightly damp. After about a quarter mile, the canyon opened into a hidden valley surrounded by tall cliffs. Jack's breath caught in his throat at what he saw. It was an Apache camp, but not just any camp. There were at least 30 warriors here, plus women and children. Horses grazed in a meadow beside a clear stream. Smoke rose from several fires where the women were cooking. Children played near the water while their mothers worked. And there, sitting by themselves near one of the fires, were 3 small figures in torn and dirty dresses. The captured girls. Jack's heart pounded as he studied the scene through his spyglass. The girls looked scared but not hurt. The oldest one, a girl with long blonde hair, had her arms around the 2 smaller ones. She was trying to protect them, trying to be brave even though she was probably terrified. They reminded Jack so much of Emma and Lucy that his eyes filled with tears. Emma had always protected her sister just like that when they were scared during thunderstorms. She would hold Lucy tight and sing to her until the storm passed. But this storm wasn't going to pass by itself. Jack was going to have to do something about it. He studied the camp layout carefully, counting warriors and noting where the guards were posted. Black Wolf had chosen his location well. The valley was almost impossible to attack. The only way in was through the narrow canyon Jack had just used, and there were sentries posted there. Any rescue attempt would be suicide for one man alone. But Jack noticed something else. At the far end of the valley, water disappeared into another narrow crack in the rocks. It might be another way out, or it might just be where the stream went underground. Either way, it was worth investigating. Jack retreated from the canyon mouth and spent the rest of the day scouting around the valley from above. The cliffs were steep but not impossible to climb if a man was careful and had good boots. More importantly, Jack discovered that the stream did flow out of the valley through a tunnel that was just big enough for a person to crawl through. As night fell, Jack made his plan. It was dangerous and probably crazy, but it might work if he was lucky and very careful. He would wait until the early morning hours when most of the Apache would be asleep. Then, he would climb down into the valley, get the girls, and escape through the water tunnel. The biggest problem would be getting the girls to trust him quickly and quietly. They would be frightened of any white man after what they had been through. They might scream or try to run, which would wake the entire camp. Jack spent the night preparing. He cleaned his pistol and rifle one more time. He cut his rope into 3 shorter pieces that he could use to lower the girls down cliffs if necessary. He wrapped his boots in cloth to muffle his footsteps. Most importantly, he thought about what he would say to the girls to make them trust him. Just before dawn, when the air was cool and the Apache camp was quiet, Jack began his descent into the valley. The cliff face was treacherous in the dark, but Jack moved slowly and carefully, testing each handhold before trusting his weight to it. It took him almost an hour to reach the bottom. By then, the eastern sky was starting to show the first hint of gray that meant sunrise wasn't far away. Jack didn't have much time. The Apache guards were still at their posts, but they were tired after a long night of watching. Jack used every shadow and every rock for cover as he moved through the camp toward where the girls were sleeping. As he got closer, Jack could see them more clearly. They were huddled together under a single blanket near the dying embers of a fire. The oldest girl was still awake, staring up at the stars with tears running down her face. She was trying not to make any sound, but her small body shook with silent sobs. Jack's heart nearly broke watching her. She was trying so hard to be brave for the younger girls, just like Emma had always done for Lucy. But she was just a child herself, scared and alone and probably thinking her parents were never coming for her. Moving like a ghost, Jack crept closer until he was just a few feet away from the girls. He could hear the older one whispering something to herself. It sounded like a prayer. "Please God," she whispered so quietly that Jack could barely hear her. "Please send someone to take us home. We'll be good, I promise. Just please don't let them hurt Katie and Mary." Jack knew he had to move now, before the guards made their next round. He crept up behind the girl and gently put his hand over her mouth. Her eyes went wide with terror, and she started to struggle. "Shoo," Jack whispered in her ear. "I'm here to help you. I'm going to take you and your friends home, but you have to be very quiet." "Can you do that?" The girl stared at him with huge blue eyes. After a moment, she nodded slightly. Jack slowly moved his hand away from her mouth. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Jack Morrison. I'm a friend. What's your name?" "Annie. This is Katie and Mary." She pointed to the two smaller girls who were still sleeping. "Listen carefully, Annie. I'm going to get you out of here, but we have to move very quietly and very fast. Can you wake Katie and Mary without making any noise?" Annie nodded. She gently shook the other two girls awake, putting her finger to her lips to show them they needed to be quiet. The younger girls looked confused and scared, but they trusted Annie and stayed silent. Jack studied the three children. Annie was probably 10 years old, tall and thin with long blonde hair that was tangled and dirty. Katie looked about 8, with shorter blonde hair and a round face marked with tear tracks. Mary was the youngest, maybe 6 years old, with huge brown eyes that reminded Jack painfully of Lucy. "We're going to crawl very quietly toward those rocks," Jack whispered, pointing to a pile of boulders near the stream. "Stay low and don't make any sound. If I stop, you stop. If I go down flat, you go down flat. Understand?" All three girls nodded. Jack could see they were terrified, but they were trying to be brave. Annie held Katie's hand, and Katie held Mary's hand. They were going to face this together. Jack led them across the camp, moving from shadow to shadow. Every few feet he stopped and listened, making sure no guards were coming. The girls followed perfectly, moving like little mice across the ground. They were almost to the rocks when Mary stepped on a dry stick. The crack sounded as loud as a gunshot in the quiet morning air. Everyone froze. From across the camp came the sound of someone stirring. A guard was getting up to investigate the noise. Jack could hear moccasined feet moving their direction. "Down," Jack whispered, and all four of them dropped flat behind a low rock. Jack pulled his knife from his belt. If the guard found them, Jack would have to kill him quickly and quietly, or they would all die. The footsteps came closer. Jack could see the guard now, a young Apache warrior with a rifle in his hands. The man was looking around carefully, trying to find what had made the sound. He was only 20 feet away and coming closer. Jack tensed his muscles, ready to spring. If the warrior took 3 more steps, he would see them. Jack would have to attack, and that would wake the whole camp. But then, one of the horses whinnied and stamped its feet, probably bothered by flies. The guard turned toward the sound and walked away to check on the animals. After a few minutes, he went back to his post. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. "Stay close," he whispered to the girls. They made it to the rocks without any more problems. Now came the hard part. The stream disappeared into a tunnel that was just barely big enough for an adult to crawl through. It would be completely dark inside, and they would have to crawl through water. "I know this looks scary," Jack whispered to the girls, "but this tunnel leads outside the valley. We're going to crawl through it to escape." Mary started to cry silently. She was too young to understand what was happening, and the dark tunnel looked terrifying to her. Annie put her arm around her little friend. "It's okay, Mary. The man is going to help us get home. We have to be brave." Jack's throat tightened at Annie's words. This little girl was showing more courage than most grown men he had known. She was scared too, but she was taking care of the others. "I'll go first," Jack told them. "Annie, you come next, then Katie, then Mary. Hold on to the person in front of you and don't let go no matter what. The tunnel isn't very long, and there's light at the other end." Jack hoped that was true. He had seen where the stream came out of the valley, but he didn't know for sure that the tunnel was passable. If it got too narrow or if there was a cave-in, they would all be trapped. But there was no other choice. The sun was starting to come up, and soon the whole Apache camp would be awake. They had to go now or never. Jack crawled into the tunnel first. The water was cold and about 6 inches deep. The tunnel walls were rough rock that scraped against his back and elbows. Behind him, he could hear Annie encouraging the other girls. "Just think about home," she was whispering. "Think about Mama and Papa. We're going home." The tunnel seemed to go on forever in the pitch blackness. Jack's knees were getting raw from crawling on the rocky bottom, and his back ached from staying bent over. But finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he saw a dim light ahead. The tunnel opened into another small canyon outside the valley. Jack crawled out and immediately turned to help the girls. Annie came next, then Katie, then little Mary. They were all soaked and shivering, but they were out. "You did great," Jack told them. "You were all very brave." But they weren't safe yet. They were outside the valley, but they were still deep in Apache territory. Black Wolf's warriors would discover the girls were missing soon, and then they would start searching. Jack had hidden Dusty in a cave about a mile away. The horse couldn't carry all 4 of them very far, but Jack had a plan for that too. There was an old mining camp about 10 miles south where they could find more horses and supplies. "We have to keep moving," Jack told the girls. "Can you walk for a while?" Annie nodded for all of them. "We can do it, Mr. Morrison." They started walking south through the maze of canyons. The girls were tired and scared, but they kept going without complaining. Jack watched them with growing admiration. These children had been through a terrible experience, but they weren't giving up. As they walked, Annie told Jack their story. They had lived in Pine Valley with their families. Annie's parents ran the general store. Katie's father was a blacksmith. Mary's parents had a small farm. It had been a peaceful little town where everyone knew everyone else. Then, the Apache had come at dawn 3 days ago. The attack was swift and brutal. Most of the adults were killed in the first few minutes. The children who survived, including Annie, Katie, and Mary, were taken as captives. "Are Mama and Papa really dead?" Katie asked quietly as they walked. Jack didn't know how to answer that. The children needed to know the truth, but they were so young and had already been through so much. "I don't know for sure," Jack said finally. "But I promise you that I'm going to take care of you. All of you. Whatever happened, you're safe now." It wasn't entirely true. They wouldn't be safe until they were back in Red Creek or another white settlement. But Jack wanted the girls to have hope, something to hold on to during the hard journey ahead. They reached the cave where Jack had hidden Dusty just as the sun was coming up over the mountains. The horse was glad to see Jack and nickered softly when he approached. Jack gave Dusty some water and a handful of grain, then lifted Mary onto the horse's back. "Mary's the smallest, so she gets to ride," Jack explained. "The rest of us will walk for now." As they started south again, Jack kept watching their back trail. Smoke was rising from the hidden valley where the Apache camp was located. The warriors had discovered that the girls were missing. Soon they would be following Jack's trail. But Jack had tricks of his own. He led the small group through streams to hide their tracks. He took them over rocky ground where footprints wouldn't show. He even backtracked a few times to confuse any pursuit. By noon, they had covered about 6 miles. The girls were tired but still going. Jack was proud of their courage and determination. They reminded him so much of Emma and Lucy that it made his chest ache. But he also knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Black Wolf's warriors would be following them now, and Apache could travel much faster than one man with 3 children. The race was on, and Jack wasn't sure he could win. As they rested in the shade of a large boulder, Jack heard something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, carried on the desert wind, came the sound of war cries. The Apache had found their trail. Jack looked at the 3 girls sitting beside him. Annie was braiding Mary's hair to get the tangles out. Katie was sharing her water with a small desert flower she had found. They looked so innocent and helpless. But Jack Morrison had made them a promise, and he intended to keep it. No matter what happened, he was going to get these children home safely. The war cries were getting closer. The war cries echoed through the canyon like the howls of angry wolves. Jack's heart pounded as he realized how close the Apache warriors were getting. They had been following the trail faster than he had expected, and now they were maybe an hour behind. "We have to move faster," Jack told the girls, trying to keep his voice calm. He didn't want to scare them more than they already were. Annie looked at him with those serious blue eyes. "They're coming after us, aren't they?" Jack nodded. There was no point in lying to her. Annie was smart enough to understand what the war cries meant. "Yes, but we're going to stay ahead of them. I know this country better than they think I do." Jack lifted Mary back onto Dusty's back and took the horse's reins. "We're going to move fast now. If you get tired, tell me right away. Don't try to keep going if you can't." They started moving again, but now Jack was pushing them harder. Instead of following the easy paths through the canyons, he led them up steep slopes and across rocky ridges that would slow down the Apache horses. It was harder work, but it might buy them some time. The girls struggled with the rough terrain, but they didn't complain. Katie stumbled several times on the loose rocks, and Annie helped her up each time. Mary clung to Dusty's mane with her small hands, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. After 2 hours of hard travel, Jack found what he was looking for. Hidden in a cluster of boulders was the entrance to an old mine shaft. Jack had discovered it years ago when he was hunting in these mountains. The shaft went deep into the rock and had several side tunnels where they could hide. "In here," Jack whispered, leading them into the darkness. The mine was cool and quiet after the heat of the desert. Jack had brought candles in his pack, and he lit one to give them some light. The yellow flame danced on the rock walls, creating strange shadows that made the place look mysterious and a little scary. "Is this where we're going to stay?" Mary asked in a small voice. "Just for a little while," Jack assured her. "Until the bad men go away." Jack positioned them deep in the mine where they couldn't be seen from the entrance. He gave the girls some jerky and hardtack from his pack and told them to rest. Then, he crept back to the mine entrance to watch for the Apache. He didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, he could see warriors moving through the canyon below. They were following the trail Jack had left, but slowly and carefully. They knew he was trying to trick them. Jack counted at least 8 warriors, all painted for war and carrying rifles in addition to their traditional weapons. These weren't just any Apache. These were Black Wolf's best men, experienced fighters who had been in many battles with white settlers. The warriors stopped not far from the mine entrance and spread out to search the area. Jack's blood went cold as he realized they had lost the trail and were looking for signs of where he and the girls had gone. One of the warriors, a tall man with gray streaks in his black hair, was clearly the leader. He directed the others with sharp hand signals, and they obeyed him immediately. This had to be Black Wolf himself. Jack watched as Black Wolf studied the ground where Jack had tried to hide their tracks. The war chief was a skilled tracker, and Jack could see him working out what had happened. It was only a matter of time before Black Wolf figured out that they had gone up instead of continuing down the canyon. Jack crept back to where the girls were waiting. They looked up at him with hopeful faces, expecting him to tell them that everything was all right. But Jack knew better. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "The Apache are very close. We can't leave the mine right now, but we need to be ready to move fast if they find us. Annie, I want you to take Katie and Mary deeper into the mine. Follow that tunnel there." He pointed to a side passage that led away from the main shaft. "Don't use any light, and don't make any sound. If you hear fighting, keep going until you reach the end of the tunnel." "What about you?" Annie asked. "I'm going to stay here and make sure they don't follow you." Annie's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to fight them, aren't you?" Jack didn't answer directly. "You're a brave girl, Annie. I know you'll take good care of Katie and Mary. That's your job now." Outside the mine, Jack could hear voices speaking in Apache. The warriors were getting closer, searching every possible hiding place. Soon they would check the mine shaft. Jack quickly gathered some loose rocks and built a small wall across the main tunnel, leaving just enough room for him to shoot through. It wasn't much protection, but it might help if he had to make a last stand. The voices were getting closer. Jack could hear boots scraping on rock as someone climbed up toward the mine entrance. He checked his rifle and pistol one more time, making sure they were loaded and ready. Behind him, he could hear the girls moving deeper into the mine. Annie was whispering encouragement to the younger ones, helping them feel their way through the darkness. Jack was proud of how brave they were being. A shadow appeared at the mine entrance. One of the Apache warriors had found the opening and was peering into the darkness. Jack held his breath, hoping the man wouldn't see anything suspicious. But the warrior was too experienced to be fooled. He called out to the others in Apache, then started moving into the mine with his rifle ready. Jack had no choice. He aimed carefully and pulled the trigger. The rifle shot was deafeningly loud in the confined space, and the warrior dropped to the ground. Immediately, war cries erupted from outside as the other Apache realized where Jack was hiding. They started shooting into the mine entrance, and bullets whined off the rock walls around Jack's position. Jack returned fire, trying to keep them from rushing into the mine. But there were too many of them, and they had him trapped. It was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed his position. Then, Jack heard something that made his heart sink. From deep in the mine came the sound of Mary crying. The little girl was scared by the gunfire and couldn't help herself. The Apache heard it too. Black Wolf shouted orders to his men, and Jack could hear them spreading out to find other entrances to the mine. If there were other ways in, the girls would be trapped. Jack made a desperate decision. He couldn't fight all the Apache and protect the girls at the same time. But he might be able to lead the warriors away from the mine. "Annie," he called out. "Take the girls and keep going. Don't stop no matter what you hear. Find a way out of the mine and head south toward the old mining camp. Hide during the day and travel at night. We can't leave you." Annie called back. "You have to. It's the only way." Jack waited until he heard the girls moving again, then he left his rock barricade and headed for the mine entrance. He was going to make a run for it, hoping to draw the Apache away from the mine and give the girls a chance to escape. He burst out of the mine entrance shooting, surprising the Apache warriors who were positioned outside. Jack managed to hit one more man before diving behind a boulder as return fire erupted around him. Now came the hard part. Jack started running from boulder to boulder, always moving away from the mine. Every time the Apache got close, he would turn and fire a few shots to keep them at a distance. The chase led down into the canyon and, then, up the other side. Jack used every trick he knew, hiding behind rocks, using the terrain to his advantage, always staying just far enough ahead to avoid being captured. But Jack was one man against 7 experienced warriors, and they were slowly surrounding him. His ammunition was running low, and his water was almost gone. He couldn't keep this up much longer. Just when Jack thought his luck had run out, he heard something that changed everything. From somewhere behind the Apache came the sound of gunfire, but not from Jack's rifle. Someone else was shooting at the warriors. Jack risked a look over the boulder where he was hiding. Coming up the canyon were 4 riders, white men with rifles, and they were shooting at the Apache from behind. The warriors were caught between Jack and the newcomers, and several of them had already been hit. Black Wolf shouted orders to his remaining men, and they started retreating toward higher ground. But the white riders kept coming, and their shooting was accurate. Within minutes, the Apache war party had been scattered. One of the riders spurred his horse toward Jack's position. As he got closer, Jack recognized him. It was Tom Bradley, the sheriff from Red Creek. "Jack! You all right?" Tom called out. "I'm fine," Jack replied, standing up from behind the boulder. "How did you find me?" "Followed the smoke from Black Wolf's camp. When we saw he was moving this direction with a war party, we figured you might need help." Tom looked around at the bodies of the Apache warriors. "Where are the girls?" "Hidden in a mine shaft back there. I had to draw the Apache away from them." Tom and his 3 men helped Jack search for the mine entrance. When they found it, Jack called into the darkness. "Annie! Katie! Mary! It's safe now. Come out." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, Jack heard small footsteps echoing in the mine shaft. Annie appeared first, leading Katie and Mary by the hand. All 3 girls were covered with dust and dirt, and their eyes were red from crying. But they were alive and unhurt. Mary ran straight to Jack and threw her small arms around his legs. "I was scared," she whispered. Jack knelt down and hugged all 3 girls. "You were very brave. All of you. I'm proud of you." Tom Bradley looked at the children with gentle eyes. "Let's get you girls home," he said. But even as they prepared to leave the canyon, Jack knew their troubles weren't over. Black Wolf had escaped with some of his warriors, and the war chief wouldn't give up easily. The Apache leader had lost face when the girls escaped, and he would want revenge. As they rode out of the canyon, Jack noticed something strange. The 3 girls were no longer wearing their torn and dirty dresses. Somehow, during their time in the mine, they had changed into Apache clothing. Small doeskin tunics with intricate beadwork decorated their arms and faces with traditional markings. "Where did you get those clothes?" Jack asked Annie. Annie looked embarrassed. "The Apache women gave them to us before you came. They said we were part of the tribe now and had to dress like Apache girls." Jack studied the markings on the children's faces more carefully. They weren't just decorations. They were tribal markings that indicated the girls had been adopted into the tribe. According to Apache law, that made them Apache children, not white captives. This complicated everything. If Black Wolf could prove that the girls had been legally adopted according to tribal custom, he might have a legitimate claim to them under the treaties between the Apache and the territorial government. Jack didn't say anything to the girls about this. They had been through enough already. But, as they rode toward Red Creek, Jack's mind was working on the problem. How could he prove that the girls belonged with their own people and not with the Apache? As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky red and orange, Jack made a decision that would change all their lives. When they reached Red Creek, he wasn't going to turn the girls over to the territorial authorities. Instead, he was going to take them somewhere safe where Black Wolf couldn't find them. The 3 little girls had become his responsibility now, just like Emma and Lucy had been. And Jack Morrison wasn't going to let anyone take them away from him. Not the Apache. Not the territorial government. Not anyone. As they rode through the darkness toward Red Creek, Jack could hear Annie singing softly to Mary and Katie. It was a lullaby that Sarah used to sing to Emma and Lucy, and the sound made Jack's throat tight with emotion. These children needed him, and he needed them. They were going to be a family now, whether the world approved or not. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness of the desert, Black Wolf was planning his next move. The war chief hadn't given up on the girls, and he would never stop hunting them. But Jack would be ready for him. This time, he wasn't going to lose the children he was trying to protect. This time, he was going to save them all. 6 months after the rescue, Jack Morrison stood on the porch of his new ranch, watching Annie, Katie, and Mary play in the yard. The morning sun was warm on his face, and, for the first time since Sarah and the twins died, he felt something close to peace. The ranch was small but comfortable, located in a hidden valley about 50 miles from Red Creek. Jack had bought it with the reward money from the territorial government, and he had spent months making it into a real home for the girls. Annie was now 11 and had grown taller over the winter. She helped Jack with the cooking and cleaning, and she was learning to read from an old Bible that had belonged to Jack's mother. Katie, now 9, was quieter but more artistic. She drew pictures of horses and flowers on pieces of bark with charcoal from the fireplace. Mary, the youngest at 7, followed Jack everywhere and called him Papa Jack. It hadn't been easy getting to this point. When Jack and Sheriff Tom Bradley had brought the girls back to Red Creek, there had been a lot of questions and problems. The territorial authorities wanted to know why Jack hadn't turned the girls over to them immediately. They also wanted to know about the Apache markings on the girls' faces and clothing. Jack had expected trouble about the markings. According to some interpretations of the treaties with the Apache, children who had been formally adopted into the tribe belonged to the Apache, not to white society. The beadwork and face paint that the girls wore were proof that they had been accepted into Black Wolf's band. But Jack had an answer ready. The night before they reached Red Creek, he had carefully washed the markings off the girls' faces and hidden their Apache clothing. When the authorities questioned them, Annie, Katie, and Mary honestly said they had been captives, not adopted children. They were too young to understand the legal implications of the adoption ceremony they had gone through. Still, there were complications. None of the girls had any living relatives that anyone could find. Pine Valley had been completely destroyed, and all the adults killed or driven away. The territorial government wanted to put the children in an orphanage in the territorial capital. That was when Jack made his bold announcement. Standing in the sheriff's office with his hat in his hands, he had said the words that changed everything: "I want to adopt them. All 3 of them." Sheriff Tom Bradley had looked surprised. "Jack, are you sure about this? Taking care of 3 little girls is a big responsibility." "I'm sure," Jack had replied. "These children have been through enough. They need a real home, not some institution where they'll be just numbers." The territorial authorities had been skeptical at first. Jack was an unmarried cowboy with no experience raising children. But he had the reward money to support them, and, more importantly, he had the respect of the local community. Sheriff Bradley vouched for Jack's character, as did the pastor and several other leading citizens of Red Creek. Most importantly, when the officials interviewed the girls, all 3 of them made it clear they wanted to stay with Jack. Annie spoke for all of them when she said, "Mr. Morrison saved our lives. He's good to us. We want him to be our new papa." The adoption had taken 3 months to finalize, but eventually Jack became the legal guardian of Annie, Katie, and Mary. He had sold his old ranch property and used the money, along with the reward, to buy the new place where they could start fresh. The ranch was perfect for their needs. It had a sturdy house with 3 bedrooms, a barn, a chicken coop, and a small orchard. There was good water from a spring, and the valley provided natural protection from both weather and unwanted visitors. Jack had also taken precautions against Black Wolf. The war chief had not given up his pursuit of the girls, and there had been several sightings of Apache scouts in the area around Red Creek. Jack knew that sooner or later, Black Wolf would track them down. So Jack had prepared. He had stocked the ranch with weapons and ammunition. He had built hidden tunnels under the house that led to a cave in the hillside where the girls could hide if necessary. He had even made arrangements with neighboring ranchers to come to their aid if they saw smoke signals indicating trouble. But, as the months passed peacefully, Jack began to hope that maybe Black Wolf had given up. Maybe the war chief had found other things to worry about. Maybe they could live quietly in their hidden valley without ever being discovered. That hope was shattered on a warm spring morning when Jack was teaching Mary how to milk their cow. Annie came running from the house with fear in her eyes. "Papa Jack! Come quick! There are men on horses coming up the valley." Jack's blood went cold. He handed the milk bucket to Mary and ran to get his rifle from the house. Through the window, he could see a group of riders approaching. Even at a distance, he could tell they were Apache. "Annie, take Katie and Mary to the tunnel," Jack ordered. "Go to the cave and stay there until I come for you. No matter what you hear, don't come out." "What about you?" Annie asked, her voice trembling. "I'm going to talk to them. Maybe we can settle this peacefully." But Jack knew that was unlikely. Black Wolf hadn't tracked them down after 6 months just to have a conversation. Jack watched from the porch as the Apache riders approached. There were 12 of them, all armed and painted for war. In the lead rode a tall man on a paint horse, and Jack recognized him immediately. It was Black Wolf, the war chief who had haunted his dreams for months. The Apache stopped about 50 yards from the house, just outside rifle range. Black Wolf raised his hand in what might have been a greeting or might have been a signal to his warriors. "Jack Morrison," Black Wolf called out in English. His voice was deep and carried clearly across the distance. "We meet again." "Black Wolf," Jack replied, staying on the porch with his rifle ready. "What do you want?" "You know what I want. You have something that belongs to me." "I don't know what you're talking about." Black Wolf smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "The 3 white girls. They were adopted into my band according to our laws. They are Apache now, and I have come to take them home." Jack felt his heart sink. This was exactly what he had feared. "Those girls are under my protection now. They're my daughters, legal and proper." "Your law means nothing to me, Morrison. Apache law is older than your treaties and papers. The girls bear our markings. They were welcomed into our tribe. They belong to us." Jack knew this was the moment he had been preparing for. He could try to negotiate, but he doubted Black Wolf would listen to reason. The war chief had come here to take the girls, and he wasn't going to leave empty-handed. "I can't let you take them," Jack said firmly. "They're happy here. They're safe. They have a good life. They will have a good life with us too. Apache children are treasured and protected. But, more than that, Morrison, it is a matter of honor. You stole them from us. That cannot stand." Jack studied the Apache warriors spread out behind their chief. They were all experienced fighters, and they had him badly outnumbered. But Jack had the advantage of fighting from a defensive position, and he knew the ranch layout better than they did. "I'm giving you one chance to ride away, Black Wolf. Take your men and leave us in peace." Black Wolf's expression hardened. "You are brave, Morrison, but you are only one man. We are 12. You cannot win this fight." "Maybe not. But I can make it cost you more than those girls are worth." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the dusty yard. Jack could feel sweat running down his back despite the cool morning air. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Then, Black Wolf made his decision. He raised his rifle and let out a war cry that echoed off the valley walls. The other Apache warriors immediately spurred their horses forward, charging toward the house. Jack dove behind the porch railing and started shooting. His first shot knocked one warrior from his horse. His second shot hit another man in the shoulder, spinning him around. But the Apache kept coming, spreading out to surround the house. Bullets splintered the wood around Jack's head as he worked the lever of his rifle. He could hear the Apache shouting to each other in their own language, coordinating their attack. They were professional warriors, and they knew what they were doing. Jack managed to hit 2 more warriors before they reached the house. But then, the Apache were too close for rifle work. Jack drew his pistol and prepared for hand-to-hand combat. The first Apache warrior to reach the porch was a young man with a painted face and a tomahawk in his hand. Jack shot him at close range, but the man's momentum carried him forward, and he crashed into Jack, knocking them both down. Jack rolled away just as another warrior leaped onto the porch. This one had a knife, and he slashed at Jack's chest, barely missing. Jack grabbed the man's wrist and they struggled for control of the knife. More warriors were pouring onto the porch now. Jack was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. He managed to break free from the knife-wielding Apache and shoot another man, but he was running out of ammunition and energy. Just when Jack thought it was over, he heard something that changed everything. From the direction of the valley entrance came the thunder of hoofbeats and the sound of men shouting. Reinforcements were arriving. Sheriff Tom Bradley burst into view at the head of a dozen armed men. They had seen the smoke from the Apache campfires and had come to investigate. Now they were charging into the battle, shooting as they rode. The Apache warriors found themselves caught between Jack's defensive position and the mounted attack from behind. Black Wolf shouted orders to his men, trying to organize a fighting retreat. But the momentum had shifted. The Apache had lost too many men, and they were outnumbered now. Within minutes, most of Black Wolf's warriors were dead or wounded. The war chief himself had taken a bullet in the leg and was barely staying on his horse. Black Wolf managed to gather his surviving warriors and retreat toward the hills. But before he left, he called out to Jack one last time. "This is not over, Morrison. The girls belong to us. I will never stop hunting them." Jack watched the Apache right away and knew that Black Wolf meant what he said. The war chief was wounded but not defeated. He would be back, probably with more warriors next time. Sheriff Bradley rode up to the porch, his face grim. "You all right, Jack?" Jack nodded, though he was bleeding from several cuts and his whole body ached. "I'm fine. Thanks for coming when you did. We've been watching the valley since we heard Apache had been seen in the area. Good thing too." Bradley looked around at the bodies scattered in the yard. "This is going to bring more trouble, you know. When word gets out that Black Wolf attacked a ranch and got beaten, every Apache in the territory is going to want revenge." Jack understood. The Apache operated on a code of honor that demanded retaliation for defeats like this. More war parties would come, and next time they might not be so lucky. "What do you think I should do?" Jack asked. Bradley considered the question carefully. "You've got two choices. You can move the girls to a safer place, maybe back east where the Apache can't follow. Or you can stay and fight, but that means more battles like this one." Jack thought about Annie, Katie, and Mary hiding in the cave. They had already been through so much. Did he have the right to put them in danger again? But then, he remembered what Annie had said during the adoption proceedings. "Mr. Morrison saved our lives. He's good to us. We want him to be our new papa." The girls had chosen him, just as he had chosen them. They were a family now, and families stuck together no matter what. "We're staying," Jack said firmly. "This is our home. We're not running away." Bradley nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then, we'll help you. The ranchers in this area have been talking about forming a mutual defense association anyway. Apache raids are everyone's problem." Over the next hour, Jack and Bradley's men dragged the bodies of the dead Apache away from the house and cleaned up the evidence of the battle. Then, Jack went to get the girls from their hiding place in the cave. He found them huddled together in the darkness, just as they had been in the Apache camp 6 months earlier. But, this time, instead of fear in their eyes, Jack saw determination. "Is it over?" Annie asked. "For now," Jack replied. "But it might not stay over. Black Wolf is still out there, and he's not going to give up." Annie stood up and took Katie and Mary by the hands. "Then, we'll be ready for him. This is our home too, Papa Jack. We're not going to let anyone take us away from you." Looking at the 3 girls standing there in the cave, Jack felt a surge of pride and love that was almost overwhelming. These children had survived terrible things, but they hadn't been broken by them. They had chosen to fight for their new family, just as he had chosen to fight for them. "All right then," Jack said. "Let's go home." As they walked back to the ranch house together, Jack thought about the future. There would be more battles with Black Wolf and his warriors. There would be danger and uncertainty. But there would also be love and laughter and the simple joy of watching 3 little girls grow up into strong, brave women. Jack Morrison had lost one family to disease and fate. But now he had been given a second chance at happiness, and he was going to protect it with everything he had. The war with Black Wolf wasn't over, but Jack wasn't worried about that anymore. He had something worth fighting for now. He had Annie, Katie, and Mary. He had a home. He had a family. And that was enough to face whatever came next. As the sun set over their hidden valley, Jack Morrison stood on his porch and watched his 3 daughters playing in the yard. Annie was teaching Katie how to braid flowers into a crown. Mary was chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. The sound of their laughter filled the air like music. Jack touched his hat and smiled. Sarah would have approved of what he had done. Emma and Lucy would have loved their new sisters. The girls he had lost were at peace now, and the girls he had found were safe and happy. Tomorrow might bring more trouble. Black Wolf was still out there somewhere, planning his next move. But tonight, Jack Morrison was exactly where he belonged. He was home, with his family, and that was all that mattered. In the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon, and Jack Morrison felt truly at peace for the first time in over a year. The 3 Apache girls' markings had indeed become his salvation, not because of any mystical power, but because saving them had saved him too. They had given him a reason to live again, a purpose beyond his own grief. Enough, he had shouted that day in the canyon, and he had meant it. Enough running from his pain. Enough living in the past. Enough letting fear control his choices. Now Jack Morrison was a father again, and the 3 little girls playing in his yard were proof that sometimes, when everything seems lost, life gives you a second chance. All you have to do is be brave enough to take it.